because private sector just has more incentives to be more careful with its capital expenditure. You know, we have to get return to our shareholders, and you know, we're a company that's invested and we've kept on investing. But when you build a broadband network, you know, we make it very careful to strike a very hard bargain with the vendors and make sure that we don't just buy whatever boxes they tell us we have to buy. You know, we've designed a network very price optimized. You know, government projects that come in, you know, a lot of them have really been driven by the vendors who've come with some money. Yeah, the vendors come with some financing, and hand in hand. And the governments haven't really thought about, you know, what is this thing costing? Are we making sure we're getting a good deal? So when we compare government projects we've done in certain countries with government projects done in the same countries, we're paying about a third to do the same thing. We're paying about a third of the capex of what government projects are doing in some countries. So, you know, by enabling private sector to do this, we will do it more efficiently. Right? That's very simple. And there is a good place to do this private sector wholesale investment. You know, it's worked for us, but it is a case of you have to keep on investing, and unpredictability in a marketplace, unpredictability in major things like wayleave charges, like taxation, like spectrum fees. You know, these become a hindrance to want to invest. We see a lot of new and crazy taxes coming out of some countries. You know, Uganda having social media taxes that tax the user on using Facebook and stuff like this. You know, somehow governments are looking at the sector and seeing it as an opportunity, but the cow is not yet fat. It is not yet a case of it can be milked. Yeah. So a lot of people are asking questions around, can we use Universal Service Fund to expand this rural access problems? But we're not even accessing the funds that are being collected. I read that the NCC collected 51.3 billion or sent 51.3 billion naira back to Treasury in 2019. That's considerable amount of money. You know, as I said, they're doing very well for Nigeria as a revenue raising you know, division. But are African governments thinking about, you know, spectrum and wayleave? Are they thinking these about monetizable things they can make money of right now and milk the cow before it gets fat? Or are they thinking about these as, well, let's make these really accessible to people who actually have the real appetite to invest? And if private sector companies were given the incentive to invest, and you know, were exempted from fees as long as they met the certain exemption, you know, the investment thresholds that they said they were going to meet, that would incentivize this to happen. You know, the case is there. The case is there, and whilst there are gatekeepers, as Steve said, you know, we do have to in private sector, we probably do have to monetize in a shorter period than 10 years, but seven is about right. You know, because we do have equipment needs to be refreshed. There's a continual need. When we started building fiber networks, we were putting in technology called synchronous digital hierarchy that had units of STM1s. Now we put in that's 155 megabits per second. Now we put in minimum DWDM, a specification that has units of measure of 100 gigabits per second links. So we have to keep on refreshing the technology, and we have to keep on rebuilding the fiber as well. There was a lot of road construction projects going on, and you know, a lot of infrastructure. We build along roads mostly, and a lot of those are single carriageway roads. All across Africa, we've seen mega investment coming into making those into dual carriageway roads, and we've had to rebuild a lot of those fiber optic networks at our cost with no compensation whatsoever, despite the fact we've been paying for wayleaves for years. And then someone says, you have to move the wayleave now, and we have to rebuild and reinvest that whole build. So to think that fiber is a one-off, terrestrial fiber is a one-off cost that is going to last 25 years would be unfair on us to make that assumption, because we have to keep on repairing that. It's maintenance to stay still.
Thanks, Jared. Please go ahead. I know you wanted to say something earlier.
Okay.
Hi, Joe.
No, just making a quick point of, to say that two things. One, the 50 billion naira that NCC remitted, I'm not holding brief for NCC, but he went on to use a phrase like milking the cow. So the 50 billion naira NCC remitted to Treasury, I'm sure most of us who know Nigeria will recognize that that was part of the fine for the infraction from MTN. So it's not like a day-to-day activity. The whole thing about investments, I like what was said about the comments about doctrine. Again, there has to be engagement. Even the state governments don't understand the value. I work in a state, and which is one of the reasons why I went to Kaduna, which has probably one of the most forward-thinking governors in Nigeria. And what he's trying to do is what he did in Abuja. Abuja, all the main roads in Abuja are ducted, okay? So it makes it easier to roll out infrastructure. But guess what? When I came late last year, I'm just giving you an anecdotal point about the need for parts of government to work together. I made a lot of noise about that policy of ducting all roads because we have an urban renewal project. One of my key colleagues in government on the road side didn't listen, and after 2 months came back and said the roads are ducted, the ducts are crossing the road. So their understanding of ducting had to do with enabling the fiber optic cables to go from one side of the road to the other side of the road. And by then, a lot of the major roads had been built. So he knows what he knows, and I know what I know, and I don't know what he knows, and he doesn't know what I know. Okay, so there's a lack of engagement. Now, on the private sector side, everybody appreciates that this is long-term capital. Okay, the Liquid Telecoms of this world, and and all the other people who are building out fiber, we have a few of them in Nigeria here, 21st century main. I agree that government really has no business in that line of business. They probably won't do it too well. But come to the table. Come to Kaduna, for example. Kaduna has 9.5, 10 million people. That's the size of a small African country. Liquid is in Zambia, I believe. Come to Kaduna. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, it's okay. We can hear you. Yes,
okay,
we can hear you.
I'm not building enough infrastructure. That's why we have all these interruptions anyway. I'm in Lagos at the moment.
You pushed into Lagos State, so
not Lagos, I'm pushing into Lagos. Yeah. So, right. So, but what I'm saying is, I've been on both sides of the table. I've been on the private sector side, and I've been on the public sector. And now I'm in the public sector back again. And I know that most investors are skittish because of policy inconsistencies. They don't really understand government, but government is to them, it's like a black box. You don't understand what goes in there. It's not as in the last 2-3 years, and in particular in the last 2-3 months, I think you'll get a different attitude if you try to engage government, especially at subnational levels. Okay, I'm sure there are different flavors of collaboration. My first exposure was in Sweden, and the Swedish government itself had a dark fiber company. There are different flavors, okay? And it's like when we started 19 years ago with the GSM, some people stayed out and said Nigeria is a bit too difficult to deal with. We know who those are. Some people engaged, and they made tons of money now. So take a second look at it and engage at the state level. Thank you.
Excellent. I think that's an open call to Liquid